You can be addicted to some love and it ain't got you going in the right direction. Okay. It could have the same energy of drugs and alcohol. Okay.
This is such a great question. Okay, so first of all, Jasmine, thank you for sharing. I think that what you shared is not different from what a lot of people feel in relationships,
Yes.
including myself. I get worried, like what's going on. So yeah, I mean, I think like first you talked about like abandonment issues. Nobody wants to be abandoned. Like rejection is probably the worst feeling in the world. I don't care how secure you are. Who wants to be rejected? Like that's like the worst. That is like not good at all. So rejection is just awful, even for securely attached individuals growing up. Nobody wants to feel rejected. So I think that's good. And I think it's reasonable that you would be, worried as long as it's not excessive worry. It's not a crippling sort of worry. You always have these what ifs. What if this happens? And then what if that happens? And then what if this happens? And it just goes down this whole mountain of what ifs because you have this internal dialogue or self talk in your head. And if you're not careful, it can be really negative. And so I work with a lot of my clients on dealing with this negative self-talk because what happens is that what you're thinking has an impact on how you're feeling has an impact on what you do, your behavior, and that's when it can be crippling. So I just want to say, like, anxiety is a real feeling. Feeling anxious is actually a protective feeling because that's the reason why we're alive right now. Our DNA is alive because somewhere in our ancestry history, someone was anxious and alert and avoided danger. So, and anxiety is your friend. But when it gets out of control and crippling anxiety is not your friend anymore. So you have to say, thank you, anxiety. You have helped me. But now I think you've just gone too far. Pipe it down. And so it's having that internal dialogue with that anxiety because a lot of those anxious thoughts about what ifs, sometimes it was given to you, by your environment. Someone was like, be careful out there. Put a coat on or you'll catch a cold. Things that are told to us when we're children. You better wash your hands or you get sick. You get sick and die of COVID. All these things that they tell you is excessive worry. So you do want to keep that under control. All right. Then you mentioned about avoiding, why people avoid. People avoid because they want to protect themselves. They don't want to put themselves out there. Like they have feelings and they have, they have thoughts, but they're real cautious about sharing it. And you should be a little cautious, right? So some of this stuff makes sense to be cautious about who you share. You just can't be like an open book and just TMI with everybody and be totally open and sharing with other people. And it is impossible to kind of know when to kind of pull back. But when it gets excessively avoidant, where you just the thought of having a conversation with someone drives you crazy, and you're just like, what, I'm not gonna have this conversation with you, and then they ghost you. All y'all people that be ghosting people, stop being so avoidant. Avoidant people be ghosting you. They don't want to hear, and I just think like that's not very compassionate. And what's interesting about anxious and avoidant is they behave similarly. So, an anxious person is not going to deal with things because they're too anxious about it. What happens is that you put off. But what happens down the line, you end up being more anxious about it because you were putting it off. Where avoidant people just don't want to talk about it because it's going to be too overwhelming for them. And sometimes they just are clueless. Like they haven't had the ability to have somebody, they haven't had ability to feel or to encourage feeling or emotion, the wide range of human emotions. All of us have emotions, all of us have feelings, and it's important to regulate. Remember when I said if a baby is crying, it needs to be picked up and regulate. So you regulate for the child. You see toddlers going crazy and having meltdowns, and their mom or dad or whoever their caregiver needs to be calm. In the midst of a toddler being kind of chaotic, you want to be able to say, okay, all right, it's time to calm. It's okay. You need someone to be able to calm them down. You regulate your child so that when they get older, they can learn how to regulate themselves.